Hi everyone, my name is Brittany Adams. I am currently in the Assessment, Curriculum, and Teaching program with a concentration in STEM education. I teach at Lincoln Charter School, which is a K-5 public charter school located in York City, Pennsylvania. At Lincoln, I am the elementary STEAM teacher, so I teach STEAM to grades 3, 4, and 5. We recently just made the switch to an all virtual instruction from home, and currently all of my STEAM instruction is produced in an asynchronous format. The title of my action research project is The Impact of Digital Tools on STEAM Academic Vocabulary Acquisition in an Online Setting. The purpose of this project was stemmed by a quote I came across during research, which talked about how research suggests that one's vocabulary is directly tied to their academic success across all subject areas. With academic vocabulary being something so impactful, but also something that I know my students struggled with, I figured this would be a perfect topic to explore for my project. Throughout this project, since my instruction is currently all asynchronous, I was hoping to learn which digital tools would have the greatest impact on my students' STEAM academic vocabulary acquisition. The problem that I wanted to solve, which I briefly talked about already, is that so many of my students lack strong academic vocabularies, and because many of my students have learning disabilities, are ELLs, or fall into both of these categories, learning new words can be challenging for them, especially in an all-virtual setting. It has been a struggle for many of these students, so I wanted to use my research to find which tools would be most beneficial to help them acquire new words. For my project, the research question that I explored was how does the use of digital tools impact students' STEAM academic vocabulary acquisition? Later in this presentation, I will talk about how I further explored this question. I began the process by exploring the research that was already out there surrounding this topic. From this, I was able to gather an idea of what research suggests components of effective vocabulary instruction look like. One key theme was that vocabulary instruction is most effective when it is multifaceted, meaning that it includes multiple representations of the word, including the use of graphic organizers, peer discussions, games, and visual components. The research also suggested that explicit or direct vocabulary instruction is often more effective than implicit, especially for ELL students, especially when it focuses on being able to identify the word as well as examples and non-examples of the term. I also explored the impact that technology had on vocabulary acquisition because I knew this would be a key component of my research. While one study suggested the importance of using digital tools like graphic organizers and games, another tool also discussed the need for teacher involvement, not just letting the students loose with the tool and expecting them to adequately perform. With this research in mind, I began narrowing down which tools I wanted to explore in my research. I decided to carry out this study with 3 of my 3rd grade classes. I chose 3rd grade because it's their first year of STEAM, so I knew they didn't have as much background knowledge on the terms that we would be learning. Each class worked with the same 8 vocabulary words, and they watched the same videos that I created to introduce the terms. They also took the same pre, post, and formative assessments throughout the study. The variable that differed between each class was the tool that was used to practice these vocabulary terms. The first tool that I selected was Flocabulary. Flocabulary uses music to reinforce the vocabulary terms. I always use these videos in my course, but had never explored the accompanying activities, so I thought it would be a good tool to further look at for this project. The second tool that I used was a new tool for me that I discovered called Deck Toys. This tool allows the teacher to input their own vocabulary words and definitions, and then it generates a path of games for the students to complete. For this tool, students using it completed 1 game on their path each day. The third tool that I selected was a digital version of the Frere model. Each student was assigned 1 word per day in which they had to identify the definition, a picture, and both examples and non-examples of the term. Once they completed this graphic organizer, it was scored with an accompanying rubric. Throughout this study, I collected data from a pre- and post-assessment that was identical and given to all participants. I also used progress reports and rubric scores from the digital tools, while also having students complete a daily exit ticket on Schoology that was the same for every student, regardless of the tool that they used to practice. From the data, three key themes emerged. The first was how well each tool helped students respond to both knowledge-based and application-based questions. Questions from the pre, post, and formative assessments were all categorized as either knowledge-based, meaning that the students had to understand the meaning of the word, or application-based, where the students had to apply the word to a new situation. The data showed that Flocabulary students yielded the highest percentage of questions correct in both categories on the post-assessment. But it was also interesting to note that students who used Dectoys had the largest amount of growth from pre to post assessment with knowledge-based questions, while Flocabulary yielded the largest percentage of growth in application questions. When looking back at the activities these tools had students completing, these are logical results because Dectoys focused solely on knowledge-based practice, while Flocabulary and the Frere model gave students opportunities to practice both knowledge and application type questions. A second theme that emerged was the impact that these tools had on vocabulary acquisition. Overall, Flocabulary had the highest percentage of growth from pre to post assessment, followed by Dectoys and then the digital Frere model. Looking at the data, the class that used Flocabulary had almost a 10% higher average growth rate than those that used the other two tools. The data also showed that Flocabulary had the highest number of students who had at least 50% growth rate increase from the pre to the post assessment, meaning that they at least doubled their score from the beginning to the end of the unit. Students who used Flocabulary also had the highest number of mastery scores on the post assessment. Again, this data makes sense because Flocabulary gave students the most opportunity to practice both knowledge and application-based questions. Students couldn't achieve mastery on the assessment if they were not able to complete both types of questions, as 50% of the post-assessment was knowledge-based and the other 50% was application-based. The third and final theme that emerged was the concepts that proved to be problematic for all students, regardless of the tool that was used to practice their words. Across all post-assessments, understanding and applying the terms criteria and constraint were consistently the lowest scored questions for all three classes. The same pattern was highlighted in the digital tool progress reports produced by each tool that the students used. On the Flocabulary vocabulary game report, the two most missed questions related to these two terms. Additionally, when looking at the rubric scores for the digital Frere model, only about 45% of total possible points were earned for both of these terms. This data shows that these two terms are areas that all students need extra support with, regardless of the tool that they used in their class. The biggest thing that I learned from this project was to have more awareness of the tools that I'm using with my students and the impact that they actually have on the skills that they are learning. It also helped me become more confident with digging deeper into assessment results and understanding how to use these results to drive the next steps in my instruction. This project impacted my role as a teacher because it helped me develop an interest in seeing how different technologies impact the results of my students. None of the tools that I used were that fabulous data-wise, so now I have an interest to see what other tools are out there and how they can impact my instruction. Looking at how this project could inform my school, the tools that I selected can be used for any subject area and can be adjusted to fit multiple grade levels. Depending on the purpose of the tool needed, I can now provide teachers with a more in-depth look at these tools as well as their impact on instruction. I can also share any other tools I come across upon further exploration. Thank you for listening to my presentation. If you have any questions about my research, please feel free to reach out to me. Thank you.